to me, the paraphrase for the power of dialogue in times of insecurity is love in a time of hatred. And that's what I want to address. Because the greatest threat that people now fear is terrorism. Yet, our current methods for dealing with terrorism are simply repeating previous grave errors. And the decision-making that is carrying on at the moment simply exacerbates the problem. In order to map an effective strategy for dealing with terror, it's vital to understand how militant fighters think and what they fear. To respond to terrorism with violence is counterproductive, in my view, because violence is what terrorists best understand. And they're masters of exploiting our addiction to news of their brutality. Violence, says former Islamic State captive Nicolas Hénin, is exactly what his captors wanted. They will be heartened by every sign of overreaction, he says, of division, of fear, of racism, and of xenophobia. As an example of how the international community has responded well, he described the recent escalation of the refugee crisis and the corresponding offers from Europe of homes to fleeing Muslims. And he described this as a blow to ISIS, Islamic State. And I must say, I'm downright ashamed of my own government's mean response. Dia Khan was born in Oslo of Pashtun parents, and she's an Emmy Award-winning documentary filmmaker. And her most recent project, which is called A British Jihad, involved 2 years of interviews and filming with former Islamic extremisms. And she says their mission is aimed at breaking the world into two opposed camps, jihadis and crusaders, locked in an apocalyptic battle that fits into their own reductive worldview. The Islamic State does not want us to open our doors to their refugees. It wants them to be hopeless and desperate. It does not want us to enjoy ourselves with our families and friends in bars and concert halls, stadiums and restaurants. It wants us to huddle in our houses within our own social groups and close our doors in fear. So, one thing is to be wary of fear contagion. Equip ourselves with the facts. For example, in the United States in 2015, more people were shot and killed by toddlers than by terrorists. Philip McKibben says that we should be wary of allowing our emotions to dictate the ways in which we respond to terrorism. Terrorists want us to feel shock, outrage, insecurity, terror. A loving response to terrorism would be proactive rather than reactive. It would see us responding to the causes of terrorism rather than concerning ourselves disproportionately with terrorist actions. So let's come to this question of causes. It's a painful fact that legitimate states enact much more violence worldwide through military intervention, currency deals, and resource extraction than non-state terrorists do. The ongoing exploitation of less powerful countries by the West and its allies does not excuse terrorist action, but it does help to explain it. So, in my view, to prevent terror requires radical acts on our part. So what could be the most loving, effective approach that governments and people could take to defuse international terrorism? And this is the toughest issue, the toughest ethical and moral issue that we have in front of us today, I think. So it could be to immediately adopt genuinely fair and peaceful processes in our country's dealings with other peoples. this strategy would deprive terror groups of one of their most compelling justifications for violence. Compassion requires us to think of terrorists as people. It encourages us to understand that their actions, however hateful, come from a place of grievance, humiliation, and isolation. It asks us to believe that their pain, and the pain that so many other people are feeling in this time of terror, is not insurmountable, that collectively we're able to overcome it. So, what would be more effective strategies than the ones we're currently using? One would be to asphyxiate terror. Nothing should be done which supports the image of the terrorist as a heroic warrior defending the interests of the people. So incidents like Abu Ghraib, where our soldiers behaved so badly, the killing of innocent civilians in Fallujah, tank shells fired into the Gaza Strip, and the vast personal coverage of the Paris bombers and the Brussels bombers all made it easier for militants to claim convincingly that their campaign of violence, repugnant to so many observers, is not only legitimate amongst Muslims, but, in their view, noble. So when Western media consistently feature terrorists on their front pages, giving them quasi-populist names like Jihadi John, they can see themselves as global celebrities. Other young men then naturally crave such oxygen of publicity, even if it costs them their lives. Western leaders need to orchestrate a cohesive and coordinated program to educate media editors why featuring portraits and biographies of suicide bombers simply gives airspace to jihad. The opposite, denying airspace, would work far better to minimize the glamour of brutality. Secondly, do what ISIS most fears: unite. Avaaz, how many people here know what Avaaz is? A-V-A-A-Z. Not many, it's interesting. It's a global web movement to bring people-powered politics to decision-making everywhere. It's only 5 years old, but it's growing at 1 million per month to become the globe's largest and most powerful online activist network. And nearly a year ago, they published as follows: ISIS's goal is to split the human family, to divide the world's 1.5 billion Muslims from everyone else. Muslims are almost 1/4 of humanity, and 99% of Muslims are as horrified by the ISIS attacks as everyone else. They've been the greatest victims of ISIS and have the greatest power to help defeat it. So let's answer hate with humanity and seize this chance for transformative change. It is a huge opportunity. And just to carry on with what Avaaz said, for all of us, Muslims and non-Muslims everywhere, to fiercely welcome each other into our one human family like never before. ISIS attacks seek to spread hate and fear, to divide the world's 1.5 billion Muslims from everyone else. Let's answer their hate with wisdom. So, on that note, it's time to give wisdom some muscle. In Rising Women, Rising World, the organization I helped set up 3 years ago, we ask ourselves the hardest question, the one most likely to provoke ridicule. What could be done to bring the young warriors of ISIS into this embrace of compassion as well? Showing them that we need to move beyond the power struggles that have caused such misery for humanity for thousands of years. If we go on as we have done, there may be no earth to dominate. So, because love requires us to think of terrorists as people, it encourages us to understand that their actions, vicious, violent actions, come from a place of grievance, humiliation, and isolation, and a contorted desire to belong, to be part of something large and noble. Noble, in inverted commas. It asks us to imagine that their pain, and the pain that so many other people are feeling in this time of terror, is not insurmountable. And to think that way, and to be prepared to act, requires courage. My government, the British government, ought to know from our experience in Northern Ireland that what finally brought 30 years of terror in Northern Ireland to an end was not the application of superior force. It was the building of bridges, listening, patient mediation, respect, and negotiation. Senator George Mitchell, who played a major part in the eventual Good Friday Agreement in Northern Ireland, said, "I will listen for as long as it takes." And he did. So, second one is building bridges and empowering local people. As I mentioned this morning, over the past decade, Peace Direct has learned that it's local people who've got the power to find their own solutions to conflict and the knowledge. And they know the best way to break these recurrent cycles of violence and make peace that lasts. One lesson that we've learned from our local partners around the world is the importance of helping people at risk of disaffection to feel part of their communities again, thereby turning away from extremism. While this might seem like a liberal platitude in the face of such a violent movement as ISIS, it is in reality hard, dangerous, and dedicated work. And it can have such remarkable results as the one I described, for example, in northwestern Pakistan with Gululai Ismail. And on that score, it's clear to us that women know a lot about how to deal with violence. Women across the planet are alert to the challenges of radicalization and profoundly disturbed by the poverty of Western government responses. A decade ago, in a short book called Making Terrorism History, women made a careful analysis of the root causes of political violence, revealing the persistent influence of powerlessness, exclusion, trauma, and humiliation. We proposed 7 practical steps that could be taken in Iraq, in Israel, in Palestine, and in our own towns and cities. No political party nor media took any notice. 10 years later, in an even more serious situation, women are not simply arguing for a more sparing use of military force. We're arguing that any armed intervention should be both preceded and followed by a much wider range of strategies designed to address both the causes and effects of violence. 1, cut supplies of weapons to the region. So obvious. Military expenditure in the Middle East rose by 75% from 2001 to 2014. Saudi Arabia is globally the second largest importer of major arms from 2010 to 2014. Why are we arming a country with such a shameful human rights record, a nation that beheaded 100 people in the first 6 months of this year? Here I salute the courage of Sweden's Foreign Minister Margot Wallström in forbidding weapons exports to Saudi Arabia. Thirdly, use trained military personnel to stop rape being used as a weapon of terror. I'm sure you're familiar with the statistics, but the use of rape to impregnate the women of the other side and then leave them in this horrific dilemma of a baby whose father is the enemy. Agony for the mother. And fourthly, give women a voice in strategy. Only 4 ministers of defence globally and 2.5% of those negotiating peace agreements are female. Only 2.5% of those who sit around peace tables are female, meaning that the concerns of most of the victims of war are not heard in negotiations. So, females, in my view, with numerous exceptions, tend to build and keep the peace because we give birth to life. We have an inbuilt, hardwired longing to protect, heal, and make whole. We've trained ourselves to listen, knowing that the capacity to give another person our full attention is the fastest and most effective way to resolve conflict, as have many, many men. Women and those men who have discovered their feminine qualities have compassion. The drive not only to feel for others, we've learned so much about this in the last 2 days, but to take action to assist them. The instinct is to include, to go beyond rank and regard for the powerful, to include those who have no voice or are powerless. Now, I believe that post-menstrual women are the largest reservoir of experience, energy, and dedication that is currently untapped. We desperately need this life experience and this compassion for the work of preventing violence worldwide. I am calling on some of you leaders here to get this organized as one massively useful result from this conference. We all, women and men, are living in a world in crisis. We're faced by these challenges of our time, man-made financial, societal, and environmental crises, whereby human beings are ruining the planet to such an extent and so fast that we may become extinct. The option open to us is to become wiser and to live the humanity we all have within us. So, how are we doing for time? What time is it? Somebody tell me. The 24 minutes past, right. I'll finish in 4 minutes. Let's take a look at what such a world could be like. Let's have a world in which it becomes normal that every country installs an infrastructure for peace. This is what Mandela set in motion when he came out of jail in 1989 in South Africa, because he knew of the huge risk of civil war before there could be elections. And an infrastructure for peace starts with a national peace council, regional peace councils, city peace councils, town and village peace councils, on which are elected people trusted by the community, people trusted to make wise decisions when violence erupts. So there's no pay involved, but these people are tasked with developing a peace plan for their area. And Kenya has now passed legislation for an infrastructure for peace, and it's already paying off. And Ghana also has passed such legislation. What we want is for 10 of the most conflict risk countries to adopt an infrastructure for peace. Just imagine if every town and village in the world could call on such trusted agents of transformation. People like the people in this room, respected people who've learned since childhood how to embrace the energy of conflict and provide a strong enough container for conflicted parties to listen to each other for as long as it takes. Let's picture a world in which we make heroes out of those who put their lives on the line so others don't get killed. Those people I was telling you about this morning are virtually unknown. And we in Peace Direct spend a lot of time trying to get media coverage for them, trying to get films made about them, because that makes them safer. And also, their heroism needs to be known. It made us cry this morning, me included. So let's build a world in which we systematically train peace builders in every part of the planet in the skills of Gandhi, Mandela, and Aung San Suu Kyi, developing the kind of courses that combine the practical skills of peace building and nonviolence with the development of this inner intelligence that we've been talking about for 2 days, and the self-knowledge that can bridge the gap between us and them. Imagine if graduating from such a course became a basic qualification for standing for election to any public office. In future, community energies can be focused on building and developing a safe society because, as we know, once people feel safe, they can learn to be transparent and trusting. It's exactly what we saw in that beautiful film of the baby this morning. The community becomes knitted together in such a way that strangers or immigrants are formally welcomed to the area and shown the values of the community. To counterbalance the sense of marginalization and the persecution of people because of their group identity, we envisage the growth of local initiatives guiding youth to visualize a better future, to reintegrate into the society and to revive their cultural meaning. Most people say they want peace, but we don't put our skills and our imagination to work on the challenge. Peace building comes low down on the priority list, certainly for spending in comparison to war. Last time I did the calculations, for every $1 spent on the prevention of war, a massive $1,885 is spent on fighting wars. So, with creativity, determination, and passion, both from the top down and the bottom up, in my view, it's perfectly possible to grow and develop societies where people can live in peace. We'd start with children, teaching them the skills of nonviolent communication and learning what it feels like to stand in the shoes of another person, namely empathy and compassion. We would educate them to become aware when they're using their fear mind and when they're using their love mind. Children take to this with absolute fascination, as we know, and then they teach their parents. So this gathering has taught me such a lot about this particular aspect especially, and I'll take it home with me and apply it. And I believe we can see this happening, what I've just painted, in our lifetime, and it all starts with